capabilities.
Okay. All right, I'm going to call to order the Fire District Prudential Committee meeting of December 20th, 2021. Do you have a roll call, please? Starting on my right.
Right. Seth Burdick, Prudential Committee.
Mark Lynch, Prudential Committee.
Fran Parks, Prudential.
Ray Perron, treasurer.
Charlie Eager, clerk.
Okay. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So, do we have any, first, I forgot to put the minutes in, but I'd like to do the minutes of the November meeting, which was November 22nd, 2021 meeting. Any changes or corrections?
Not for me either.
Okay. I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of November 22nd, 2021.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Is there any public comment? Do we have anybody on chat? Okay, seeing no one, we'll move on to the treasurer.
Okay. I'd like to first oh, I'm sorry. So let me start again then, please. Talking about the November Treasurer's Report, the result of fiscal year-to-date results, starting with revenue. Overall, we're at 52% of budget versus the target for November of 42%. Tax collections are ahead of budget, but behind last year. They're behind last year because the tax levy is down approximately 16%, which means that there is less money this year to collect. So therefore, even though we're behind last year's collection rate, we are still ahead of budget. Budget being based on the tax levy. In the water department, we're behind budget, primarily because the major billing for the water department occurs in January. There is some risk that with the decline in water usage during fiscal 23, that budget may be difficult to achieve. But as it stands now, I think we will achieve it. In the fire department, we are again well ahead of budget in summary and ahead of budget with respect to ambulance. There was a $68,000 state grant receipt in November, which drives that overall cash receipt. And that's detailed on the third page in the revenue details section. I would point out that billings for ambulance are running about 3 or 4% ahead of collections, which would mean that over time, we'll see a decline in collections or in revenue as it catches up with the billings. Finally, in the other category, we're reflecting the $106,000 COVID grant receipt for cost reimbursement. The costs were incurred in fiscal 21, but received in fiscal 23, excuse me, fiscal 22, getting a year ahead of myself. On the expenditure side, overall, we're below budget, below the target budget of 42%. There are some variances which are explained by one-time early in the year expenditures. For example, in the Prudential Committee category, we pay for our property and casualty insurance in July. That bill of $143,000 is an annual payment which distorts the year-to-date performance. So the 49%, while being apparently above budget, when you look at the expenditures on page 4, are well below budget.
Ray, can I interrupt for just 1 second?
You sure can.
What does that property and casualty insurance premium cover? Freedom Hall, obviously, but what else?
All district property and liability, water department, fire department, and Prudential.
Great, thank you.
In the fire department, we are running at 37% of budget, but included in that are expenditures for that state grant. The state grant is a cost reimbursement for radios. And while we received the money, we have expended, I believe it's all but $1,000 of that grant for radios. In the water department, we're well below budget at 35%, both salaries and expenditures. Freedom Hall, 28% relative to budget. Streetlights, 31. Library, we completed on budget. The debt service, while it reflects 77%, it is on budget. We had our initial payment on our new long-term note in October, which distorts the overall performance. And that again is detailed on page 4 in the expenditure section. Benefits are at 67%. Again, there is a one-time cost for retirements for $323,000. That obviously distorts the overall performance and benefits, but in the detail, you can see that we are well below budget. And we have taken the 1 month in November, let me back up. We've taken the 1 month medical insurance holiday in November to avoid the confusion that would occur with taking it in December. So we've granted it to the employees in November, and the district will experience it in December. Transfers are just about complete. There was a $600 item that we have transferred actually in December to complete that category. On page 2, I've cleaned up some of the terminology that I've used in the past that I think clarifies the intended use and authorization for use in the various articles. The first one, space needs, which had an additional 31,000 added to the 11,000 outstanding as of the end of last year, has $42,000 available. And that's available for the Prudential Committee to study what the district future space needs are. That could include the school property, but it would be under the direction of the Prudential Committee. The water department continues on the security system. I don't yet have a completion date for that. And fire station repairs are continuing. Again, I don't have a completion date for that, but both are under budget and in process. New articles related to the ambulance was a planned December purchase. I don't know the status of that, whether that's been delayed or not. The chief's replacement vehicle was delayed, but that has been received and is sitting now in the parking lot as a December purchase. Transfer of the school property is in process. Nothing has occurred to put that article into play, as it was designed for school property acquisition, which will probably take place, it would appear, either very late in fiscal 22 or more probably in fiscal 23, based upon when the town of Barnstable takes action. That also includes 1 year of maintenance for that school property. There are also cost studies and maintenance once the property is acquired to evaluate future use for the district and maintain that property for 1 year. Are there any questions on either the monthly revenue and expenditure or on the articles? If not, I'll turn to the capital improvement program. And I'll start off by saying that this really, in the classical sense, is not a capital budget. Our capital budget screen is $10,000 for something that will be of benefit for 2 or more years. What I've put down, or what I've attempted to lay out, are non-operating special articles that would have to be approved at a district meeting. They may or may not be capital, but they would be what I would call special articles requiring special approval at an annual district meeting. The first of these is the water service module for the VADAR system. I've put it in the finance department, even though it is really replacing a water department service. Basically, just to put this as a placeholder when we are preparing the 23 budget. We will get a quote as we learn more about that system and more about how that application would fit our circumstances. After the first year, I would envision that would become part of the operating budget of the water department.
And Ray, that VADAR system is designed to do what?
It's basically designed to do the billing and customer account record keeping for the water department, and to feed that information in summary form to the general ledger as maintained by the finance department for the district. So it's basically a billing and subsidiary ledger that would be under the control and operated by the water department, but integrated into the main accounting system of the district. This would provide basically 2 things: an upgrade in overall control, financial controls for the district, and I believe it would provide if you will, a more reliable system for the water department. And by reliable, I mean, not that the current system isn't reliable. It's a system maintained by a part-time, by a individual, and if anything were to happen to that individual, maintenance of that system would be in question. We're going for more of an institutional approach to that system, which I think provides the district with better security going forward on the maintenance of that system. What it does not do is address the segregation of duties that the auditors have commented on the past on this past year, relying on the reconciliation process that is conducted in the finance department to provide that independence of control.
And is this something that's in discussion with the water department, or?
Well, it's a feature of the fact that we're so small. I mean, the water department basically has one person. The ideal is to have one person involved in billing. No, I'm sorry, then I
No,
missed your
I was
question.
talking about the VADAR system. Is that in discussion with the VADAR system itself and the need for it? Is that something that's in discussion with the water department, or have they already
No,
requested?
they have a legacy system, if I'm understanding your
No.
question, Mark. No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm getting an echo, so it's hard to understand.
What you're saying is, have they agreed to use this system?
Right.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Because we had discussed that briefly. Last meeting, when we discussed the fact that the two systems did not correlate. And then you had remarked that there was whether,
I'm getting an echo.
you
It's
can't hear
very-
me? Turn off yours. Is that what you're saying, Mark? Is that because we had discussed this at the last meeting, remember? And then you had mentioned that there was, I don't know if it was resistance, because then there were emails, whatever, but that they weren't ready to take on a new system, or they weren't planning on, are they planning on doing it? Is that what Mark is asking?
That is.
I guess the easiest way to say it is I misspoke, because they were very much on board when we approached them after the meeting. And in fact, have been not only willing, but very good participants in the review process so far. We had a meeting scheduled at the Brewster Water Department, which uses this system. We had to cancel it because of a COVID incident at Brewster. So we're rescheduling that, but no, they are a very willing participant in that. Sorry for the confusion. The next item that and again, as you can tell, these are X's, so I'm not defining the dollar amount. What I'm after is to put placeholders in front of the commissioners, so if it chooses to go forward with these, there would be much more research and diligence work done to define a more exact number for these projects. And for example, the next one, the digitization, putting our records in digital form. I put in a number that I put together rather quickly. My assistant treasurer was very quick to point out that it's probably much higher than that, and it could be. We have to investigate what records are already available through our payroll system, what records that we do not have to keep, we can simply shred immediately, and which ones we do have to retain. It's going to be a long project and probably much bigger than that dollar figure that I put there. But it's something that the district should tackle. Right now, the storage facility is, I would say, inadequate. It's in the basement of the fire department. I can't say that I would completely rely on the fact that those records aren't deteriorating as we speak, because it is a rather moist environment. So it's something that the district is going to have to tackle in one form or the other. And I think it's going to be a big project to start off with, plus continuing maintenance, as I indicate, with reoccurring costs in this budget. Every so many years, you're going to want to, again, put the records in digital form. The next item is computers and printers. Again, this doesn't really meet the screen of a capital item, but I've put it in as a reoccurring, as laptops and printers do have a limited life, and we need to put replacement of those in our planning going forward. Other moving to district-wide needs, the first one is the sound system. I understand that we had someone visit the hall. They are going to come back with some suggestions, which are supposedly low cost. But if that doesn't work, we're going to have to tackle some form of enhanced sound system, because it would appear that we are going to be having Zoom meetings going forward. The next item is an independent IT security review. Right now, we rely on our security with Secure Networks, which is our independent IT provider. I'm recommending that the commissioners consider a review independent of that to look at not only the systems that are in Secure Networks, but a district-wide security system. There are many, if you will, portals for people to get into our systems. And the biggest risk we face, obviously, is ransomware. And there are many doors that people can use to get into that. And I think we need an expert to look at where all those doors exist and do we have adequate security on them. This would include the water department, the fire department, and the district finance offices. The next item is school property. I put in as a minimum the demolition of the building. It hasn't been decided, once we do acquire it, what the use of that building will be. But we do need a placeholder for what would be the minimum cost, and that is, again, not a firm number, because we really don't have a firm number yet independently developed from the town. The one estimate we had was $1 million. I put in 1,000,001 because I feel quite confident that that $1 million at the end of the day will be a bigger number than just $1 million.
In that regard, the town has put together I would say, very rough estimate of what it would cost to demolish the school, based on a per square foot plus. It is the similar analysis that they used when coming up with a number for the Marston Mills School. But I'm in complete agreement that it is a rough estimate, and everything we hear is that costs are increasing. So I think 1.1 is a good minimum.
Yeah, I think we'd want to develop that figure or define that figure ourselves before going forward. The next is, I believe it is a statutory requirement that the district have an office for the clerk. And so I put in there, not an office acquisition, but a lease acquisition for space It's basically 3 offices and a meeting room somewhere at about a $20 a square foot price for somewhere, an office. And as you can see, I repeat that in the 5 to 10 year category. And by the time we start doing that, the accounting rules are that I will have to account for a long-term lease as a capital acquisition. So even though I put it in here as a lease, it'll probably be a capital lease in accounting terms. And therefore, for municipal accounting purposes, it would be an asset purchase. I also discussed with the chair the fact that this building will probably need painting at some point, and part of that would be removing the existing lead-based paint in the proper environmental manner. Again, based on very quick research on my computer for various estimated prices, I came up with that. It should be viewed as a placeholder, not anything approaching an exact estimate. But it is something, again, that the district will have to envision doing at some point in the future. And then also I put in the 5 to 10 range, replacing the roof. That's a possibility. Don't know that for sure. But again, that's an approximate number.
Ray,
finally-
do we know that the extent of lead paint in this building?
As I understand, it's all of it.
Yeah. Is it required to be abated if properly maintained, which you clearly are? Is that a have to do by regulation or a nice to do?
The problem is the last time that we had it painted, it wasn't scraped or anything like that. Anything that was loose, they sort of blew off a little bit
Okay.
and then painted over it. And that's why the paint job's not lasting. Now, they no longer have to scrape it off. They now have a procedure where they can put on a material that, like a paint-like material that captures the lead and encases it. And it can just be, then removed the usual way. And I think probably what the most reasonable thing to do would be to look at the cost of doing that versus the cost of just reshingling the whole place. And whichever is less. Outside, not inside, outside. Yeah.
Is that something that requires abatement outside of paint?
Yeah, to a certain degree it does.
Is that by reg or what requires that?
I think those are the health laws, the regulations.
I knew it was for interior, I didn't realize it was for exterior.
Yeah, I think when it's you have to, at a bare minimum, you have to make sure that if you just went out and sanded this, you'd have to make sure that, you capture all the particles that are exposed or generated. Yeah. And I just wanted to say one thing about the acquisition of office space. I haven't been able to find it a second time, but I did once. I was able to bring up the requirements of the state for a municipality to rent office space, and which would include it has to be handicap accessible, it has to have existing handicap bathrooms. There's a long list of things that are required that most landlords would not be interested in doing.
Yeah, and again, I put something in as a placeholder. We're gonna have to address it one way or the other. I know that I'd be happy to continue working remotely. I imagine Lisa would. I'm sure the clerk would as well. But it's a statutory requirement, and we have to address it in some way.
Well, alternatively, we could buy Charlie a safe, a fireproof safe, and put that in his home. That's the other alternative, which of course, to the next clerk, the safe would have to get moved, but stuff is supposed to be, the materials that the clerk has are supposed to be housed in a fireproof safe.
And I think
Is that what causes the requirement for an office is to store material?
I don't know the basis of it.
So clerk is required to
Have an office. It is, for example, is this something that can be shared with other districts?
No.
And the other thing that I would wonder is if you successfully complete digitizing all your records, what's the clerk going to do? It can be accessed from anywhere. So I would think that would be a substitute for an office.
Well, I am clearly looking for an alternative. If you would prefer to work remotely and Lisa would prefer to work remotely and we can digitize our records, I would prefer to do that. Anybody know what the reg is that requires this?
I haven't tried to pull it up. I'll try to pull it up and get some definition on it.
That'd be great.
The balance of the capital budget will come from the fire department and the water department as they develop their own budgets independently. And then we'll put it together. Hopefully at that point, we'll have a little more definition on some of those early numbers. But that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Freedom Hall, I've asked Spencer Hallett to come and look at, working on the ladies' room to replace the toilet and the sink. I also asked him to give us a figure for replacing the remaining brass pipes that are in the building, which are at risk of exploding at any time. So, and that area just goes in between the two bathrooms. Any brass pipes that are left are in there to be a short run.
Okay.
So he's going to get back to me on that. Freedom Hall was busy. We had several, we had a wedding shower, we had a bridal shower, baby shower. And we had the ladies, the Historical Society did a boxwood making boxwood centerpieces. Yeah, so, and so that's all that's going on here. Okay. Next is governance study.
So.
You want to start?
I suppose so. So I guess I'll just begin we discussed this briefly, well, not discussed, but at our last meeting. And, we've all seen, I don't know if we've all, but I have, I'm sure you guys have as well, the last governance study, which is now 22 years old. And, it's my opinion that with the upcoming school property, how that's going to I guess, all of the intricacies that are going to be unveiled by the use of this property, what it shall become, what it needs to be, how much money do we want to spend, as it pertains to what we just talked about when it comes to offices and all of that stuff, essentially this whole capital improvement plan. Does it not make sense to engage someone to do a proper governance study? And so to that end, I'm curious, how would we do that, A? And B, do we have funds available to us now that we could use to do that, or would we have to go to the district meeting? Those are my questions, I guess. I put them to Ray maybe, or Fran, or who knows.
And when we talk about governance study, I just reviewed it earlier this week and then again today. The governance study covers a broad.
It's an all-encompassing study, really, and ultimately. We'll look at all of these, at least in the way that I envisioned it, or in the fashion of the last one. The legalities surrounding a whole series of events that could occur and what we could do as a district. And then, of course, all of the space needs, all of it. It's a complete picture, so.
At one point in the summary section, the authors of the prior, the authors of the prior governance study, basically said, here are the questions that need to be asked. Do you just become part of the town of Barnstable? Do you, at the other extreme, create your own town, which is possible? Is it possible to consolidate with other districts, either on a full or partial mode, meaning just water, just fire, both fire and water? And I assume that's what you're contemplating when you talk about governance.
Right, that's something that will at least allow us to have the information at hand in a way that is easily presentable, easily relatable, and understandable for the people of the district and for us to just inform, our direction. I think I just think it's something that we should probably look at now, because before we go into a situation, when we're going to acquire this property, for instance, to me is the biggest thing that would obviate the need to understand what we're going to do with it, what we should do with it, and where do we go from here? That's like exactly as you say. I think it just as an informational document for everyone in the district, so that we can make the kind of informed decisions that we'll necessarily need to make going forward. Because who knows? We don't really have we don't have a cohesive 10-year plan as it stands now, for much less a 20-year plan. So I just think that the sooner we get it done, the better and easier it will be for us to continue with plans that we have already essentially made and are beginning to execute, that we don't really have a super firm direction on.
Further to Seth's comments, there has been, in the fire commissioners, there has been, I would say it'd be fair to say that there's an impetus towards, at least in part of that commission, for a new facility for the fire department. And we've heard numbers thrown around for a new facility, at least somewhere in the range of $6 to $8 to $12 million. And at the same time, the water department has been warning us for some time about the possibility of the possibly relatively sudden need for a water filtration plant, specifically referring to the PFAS, the forever chemical issue, which again, people are just making best guesses, but that's a $10 million figure. It occurs to me that we're probably not going to buy the Kituit property and put in a new firehouse and put in a new water filtration plant, or at least if we're going to do that, we should be damn well sure that that's what people in town want. And it probably makes sense to explore whether we should be consolidating with another district or districts,
Right.
if we're possibly on that spending being on the horizon. that's.
Yeah, I just think it'll be helpful to have as a document. And I think it won't, if any information is the key to, anything that you want to have be well received and to be able to make an educated decision about whether it is about consolidation, whether, or any of the myriad options. Maybe they'll be exactly the same options that were brought up 20 years ago, but the climate has changed. Things are different now. You know, that's it. That's my thought. So I guess ultimately my question is, if we were to, I remember it wasn't that long ago, maybe 6 months ago or a year ago, when Paul Root had talked about a firm that he had, they bandied back numbers back and forth about a possible governance study, or was it the same company that had done the previous governance study way back when? No, the man who did it the first time is retired.
Retired, yeah.
Right. So what would be the first step? Say, for instance, if we were to do that, how would we proceed?
We would have to put that on the warrant
Right.
to get the authorization of the,
For any funds that would be, but would we get a quote prior to the meeting?
we'd have to get it before we put it on the warrant, yes.
Right.
We'd have to identify people who do it.
Would we have to go through the whole RFQ process or
I would bet yes, because it's going to be more than $25,000,
Right.
you know.
And the average, that number that I saw then was 35,000, was it 40,000 roughly? That was just a ballpark figure that they had. Do you not remember any of this? No.
No, he wasn't here.
But this, I feel like we discussed this recently, did we not? No, that was just emails that I was on a CC to.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that I would be in favor of putting the consolidation in with that issue. I think that's a separate issue even in and of itself that, should be separated from the district.
What's the objectives? I'm not sure I follow.
It's, there's no objective per se. If you look at what they did in the last governance study, essentially there was a lawyer retained who was an expert in municipal planning and law. Was that not the case? And they simply assessed the nature of the fire district. They examined the enabling articles, all of that, right? And then they reviewed similar entities throughout the state. And they in a forward-thinking way, said, these are the things, the legal options that you have. They didn't necessarily have a slant one way or the other, but it was initially, when I read, the documents that go along with it, they were thinking at the time that we would use this to form some kind of long-term plan, but then it ended up on the shelf and no plan was formulated.
I mean, when I read that thing, it was, you gave an answer that no one wanted to hear.
Well, I guess so.
Wait, what was that answer that no one wanted to hear, right?
Basically, economic good of the district.
After this was completed, there was a vote, because there was a question at that time whether.
There was a question at that time whether or not to secede from the town. And
Completely.
huh?
Completely,
Yeah.
just completely
Yeah,
succeed.
well, as they plainly stated in that study, that the tax dollars going into to the town of Barnstable from the village of Katuitt are nowhere remotely close to what the village of Katuitt gets back from the town.
Right.
And the situation was even worse at that time. And that was the most people who ever voted was no, not to secede from the town.
To me, the most kind of interesting part of the old governance study, hang on. The most interesting part of the old governance study was the part that undertook that financial analysis. That is, are we getting good value for our taxes? So Seth and I are thinking along the same lines. I guess it's time to raise this issue again.
That's
I
essentially
think.
what I'm saying, that if we had the same study done again, the property values have changed, the tenor of things have changed, the nature of services provided, the amount of services provided, what the village is now is not, in my opinion, granted, I'm younger and I've not been here as long, but it would bear updating it for a purpose of education and for people's decision making. I don't find it a threatening thing. It's not to say that I'm saying, well, we shall consolidate, and that's what's driving my desire to see all this stuff updated, or just to see from the town, or any, perhaps just as it was 20 years ago. The best option is to continue as usual, but if you don't have the information, then you don't have the information. I mean, that's my thought. I mean, if it seems a boondoggle, to me, it doesn't necessarily.
It may be the tail wagging the dog a little bit, but it would serve the purpose of focusing people's attention back on this issue. We got the school, maybe we need a fire department, a new firehouse, maybe we need a new filtration plant. Is everyone still okay with the way we're doing this? Or is it time for us to be looking again hard at some other way to do this?
I feel fairly confident in saying that the other fire departments, with the exception of West Barnstable, do not want to consolidate with us.
West Barnstable wouldn't either.
Oh, yeah? Okay. Then nobody wants to.
This may be a matter of,
So,
part of this is that the Prudential Committee meets and has discussions, and the Fire Committee meets and has discussions, and the Water Committee meets and has discussions. And I don't think necessarily that any of the three committees really have full understanding of the individual issues facing the individual committees. It might be worth, for example, I would like to hear the Fire Committee's view on the topic you just expressed, which is, if they think no one's going to want to merge with us, I'd want to know why. But that may be at least a good start to the answer to the question. So because the response is, well, if no one's going to merge with us, what's our long-term plan?
We plan for that eventuality, not necessarily consolidation, because I'm not in favor of consolidation per se. But a plan is better than no plan, and if it's going to be relatively inexpensive to have this information updated to get something that we can use to bolster our case, whatever it is. I just don't see what the harm in that is personally.
Because
It's the same questions we got today with that same report. You raised the same questions today based on that report. Without having anything, a great deal of that was basically historical.
Yeah.
People.
it was, and I'm not sure that I don't know that we need to replow that ground. Actually, there was like 25 pages on what constitutes the district and how many people live there, with 18 different kinds of analysis to answer the question. I think you have the answer to that question. These are the properties that we can get tax revenue from. Other than that, it's, but the short answer is maybe if we raise, if we're going to continue the way we've been, as long as we make the decision, yeah, this is the best way to go forward, as opposed to, well, we've been doing this for a while. It would be hard to do something differently, so we're just going to keep doing it the way we've been doing it. Those are big numbers that people are talking about for filtration plants and school renovations and et cetera.
So I would just say that part of we do things the way we do them is that it's spelled out in our enabling legislation
In terms of the, you know,
in terms of
like
the committees and
the committees and whatnot.
and the structure of
I did
the
see
district.
that, yeah. I did see that. But that, of course, doesn't mean that we can't,
No,
it does mean it would, if we consolidate, for example, it would be a big deal.
yeah.
It'd be a lot of work.
Yeah, be an
But-
expensive deal.
I mean, maybe the way to start this is to have, I don't know if this is something that's done routinely. I don't know why I couldn't, some kind of joint meeting between the committees, just to raise this topic and take people's temperatures. If everyone thinks, you know, we're doing just fine, that's a whole different thing than, yeah, I've been wondering about this myself. So I do like the idea of governance study, but maybe the way to start is joint meeting.
But yeah, I'm not against that. I mean, I understand, I can sense obvious trepidation about the concept of the governance study. But excuse me, my throat. I personally don't see any harm in doing it. And it is my position that we should think about doing it. And, you know, if we want to vote on it at some point, if you want to think about it, if you want to discuss it further or whatever, I don't think that it will be harmful to have that information. Whether it doesn't need to be rehashed because you say the information is still valid, that may be a good point. If it's information that will go to no good use because there's nothing to be gained from it, I don't necessarily believe that, but it's possible. I just don't think that unless we have the discussions with the individuals who are responsible for preparing these sorts of documents and we discuss it as a group, I just don't see the harm in that. So, you know, it is my position that we should pursue some form of governance study in short of that. Some form of long-term plan, and you need to have information in order to create said long-term plan. So whatever iteration, however that appears, that's fine by me.
The only caveat I would have with that at all is that we should figure out what questions we want answered. And by we, I mean this committee, the fire committee, the water committee. And then, yeah, I think it would make sense to do that.
Yeah, I call for a joint meeting. And, you know, however we want to set that up, if we want to think about that, and if someone wants to reach out to the other commissioners and see if they're interested in doing that, if they have time for that, then I would be happy to engage them in that conversation.
As would I.
I just think it's important that, not to say that there isn't enough planning, obviously, right? And you, and finance and all do, there's a significant amount of planning that goes on. But I'm just thinking about a broader picture planning. And I don't think that this governance study would be detrimental to that process. And I don't think it's unnecessary personally. But so at any rate, that's essentially all I have to say about it.
So I just,
I attended the fire commissioners meeting, and they have employed a fire chief for the duration of the period that it's going to take for them to come up with a recommendation for a new chief. So it's.
Did they have a timeline about the hiring process? Did they propose anything, or?
It could possibly be, you know, take another couple months to square away a new chief. And maybe they decide on somebody before that, but they have to move here and get someplace to live and all of those things. So the retired fire chief of Falmouth Fire Department is going to be our interim fire chief. Mike Smith, it's a very nice gentleman. He'll be starting December 31st. And I guess that's that. And so move on to, is there any public comment, anything on chat?
I had just a couple of things
Sure.
that I wanted to bring up. One briefly was to bring the group up to speed on the Katuitt School acquisition. We had a brief meeting on the 15th, which really focused on one issue. Relatively good news. We were concerned that
So
You want to do a report on the school committee?
yeah, there's nothing in it that's confidential at all. It's really one topic. We were concerned about, as I've mentioned at multiple meetings, the oil tank that's there, which is double-walled fiberglass, but whether there was a prior tank there, the answer is yes, there was. It was a 6,000 gallon. It was installed in 1957, but the good news is that it was removed in 1988. And there's a form that needs to be filled out and a box on the form that you're supposed to check if it leaked, and the box is not checked. So no guarantees, of course, but that is an encouraging bit of information. The only other thing that might be of interest to the group is, we pointed out that the third week of May is when we have our annual meeting. Their goal is to get this issue before the town council, which I'll remind you requires a 2/3 vote, sometime in first quarter 2022. I think that is perhaps an ambitious goal, but that's what they're hoping for. And the only other topic, I just had some questions about there were some emails about the street light contract. Basically that company is not renewing its contract with us or anybody else. So I understand. What did they do for us? What services did they provide? Okay.
they did the maintenance of the street lights, and that street light on Ocean View that's been taken down by by Eversource to replace the pole. Once it's ready to go back up, we need to contact our service company to put the light back.
Okay, but we'll need a new service company for that as of when?
I think the last thing I saw was, pardon me, June. I think they're giving us 6 months, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And how does that work? Is that something we need an RFP or an RFQ?
The Cape Light Compact has been negotiating all of this on our behalf and on behalf of all the other towns on the Cape that took advantage of getting the streetlights, with the exception of the village of Barnstable. They kept their own sodium lights.
So the Cape Light Compact is negotiating for all of us.
Yeah.
They're going to keep us apprised of what's happening.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And the only other item I mentioned to Fran that we have a meeting scheduled for the bylaw committee January 5th. And we will report back.
So are you going to be available to do that Zoom meeting?
Great. That was a thumbs up from Lisa. Thank you. And Freedom Hall is available, I take it?
Yes.
Okay. Great. That's all I've got.
Okay. All right. If everybody's done, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So
Is
moved.
there a second?
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.